Hi, so good afternoon. I'm sorry I should have this presentation together with my colleague Gianluca, but he's not available, he's not here, unfortunately, so I'll try to do this alone. There will be no code in the presentation, so I'm sorry for that. I'm just strategy MVP, not the technology one. But I hope so that you will get some valuable insights out of this presentation, which will be a bit more about DMP, how it fits to Sitecore rather than about Sitecore itself. So first, let's start with a bit of theory. So Sitecore is not a soulless system that existing in the marketing technology landscape. Currently, there are more than 5,000 different systems in different areas. And if you go for some scale, definitely you need to connect some of those together. So Sitecore, even though it's presented sometimes that it's capable of a lot, it's not capable of everything. So I will try to guide you through and explain you a bit why DMP, why such a technology that maybe none of you have met yet. Who was working with DMP anyhow? So 1, 2. Okay. So why DMP is important? I don't know if you remember, this lady was presenting on Sitecore Symposium from Gartner some insights about the technologies which are currently on the market and which are the ones that companies invest to. So the red ones are somehow covered by Sitecore. So Sitecore definitely is a web content management. It's an email marketing solution. It has personalization and site optimization. It has digital commerce currently introduced. It has some kind of digital marketing hub cloud capabilities, and as well something what is called customer data platform. So you can load in a lot of valuable customer data that can be used for communication. But the most important system on this lower level, which are the core systems for every company, it's a DMP, and Sitecore is not DMP. DMP is a solution which is used in the advertising technology landscape, which is sometimes it's called programmatic marketing. Quite popular. A lot of companies invest to go there and to use that because it's targeted with the display advertising, with search advertising. You can target quite precisely. You can be very effective in how to buy media, and you can save a lot in buying media, means banners, to simplify that. It's short time to market, literally is a line of JavaScript you can put anywhere. And there are many APIs to other ad tech systems that DMP has, like DSP, which is for the agencies to promote banners and to put it into the system. SSPs, which is for publishers to offer the space they have to be used for banners. And it's collecting data. It's collecting all the data about your interactions outside of the website or in the website. So the DMP knows how many banners you have clicked, on which sites, where you have been, which price comparison tools you have used, etc. So it's pretty fast in time to market, and it collects a huge amount of data. It doesn't collect offline transactions, but these transactions can be plugged in. There's a variety of vendors on the market. So we'll talk a bit today about Salesforce DMP. It's not Salesforce CRM. It's formerly known as Crux. And there are some other key players. Adform is a Danish company, quite strong in Europe. Google Audience Manager and Adobe Audience Manager, there are as well strong DMPs for the enterprise and enterprise companies. Oracle BlueSky as well, and there are plenty of others focusing on different markets, different data sets they have, and different technologies they have together. So Adobe covers almost the whole part, Google as well, Adform as well, Salesforce is trying to do. None of those is Sitecore connected. So why DMP is important and why I say it's a huge system companies invest to, it's because it has all the data available. So not just the first party data, which is the web tracking, CRM, for example, connected, but it can connect as well to second-party data. Like imagine you have an agreement with a football club you sponsor that they will give you the data about your website, about their website. So we can connect it together and to simply track the journey across all the sites, and you can then, by tracking those journeys, easily create audience and segments in DMP. So DMP itself is rules. So you say, if I'm a CRM customer, 3 months to end of the contract, I was on the price comparison tool, I was visiting your site twice in past weeks, I'm some kind of segment, probably churning customer. So this is what is done in DMP, and it's mainly done for the advertising. So people or companies can easily invest in the targeted ads. So what it has to do with Sitecore and the whole ecosystem, because of that capabilities of doing segments almost on the fly in real time, companies are starting using it or thinking about using it as a single source of segments of customers. Not a single source of all data, but segmentation is now happening in DMP because it's simply much more easier than to do it in the CRM, or faster than to do it here on the data backend, where you need to load all the data and then process the segments and do it. So companies are starting to create segments on the fly with DMP. There is machine learning, artificial intelligence plugged in as well, because there is a hell of data, so the segments are detected in the DMP, not here in the backend, because this is too slow. And because of that, companies would like to have these segments to be loaded into Sitecore as well, because it's a basic way how to do a personalized messaging or first step in the personalized communication. So that's a bit of a theory behind the technology. There are some use cases as well, typical for DMP integration. So the first one is typically targeted omnichannel campaigns because it's coming from an advertising tech. But with DMP, you can target as well people who are coming directly to your site without going through a tagged link on a banner, search link, whatever. So you can recognize person who was on the, I don't know, some price comparison portal and didn't go through that portal directly to your site. I said churn prevention is a good case for it, especially if you would like to target your customers before end of the contract period. Because probably you know that you have just 2 minutes to target those customers because they are coming just for 2 minutes. So it would be great to have the information that there are some segment. Price comparison, people are selecting cars, selecting tariffs for telcos, energy providers. They are selecting as well other services and products by comparing different companies together. So having those data available in your site is good, and you cannot get the federated experience manager to that site to track the behavior. So you need to buy the data somewhere, and they are usually with DMPs. I said as well the partner websites like sponsorship, like co-marketing, having bundles of telco tariff with energy tariff together and sell that together makes sense. And there's a special case as well for affiliate sales. Imagine that someone booked this hotel through booking.com and then goes to this site of this hotel to check if there is a wellness, if there is a pool, what are the services, and the hotel will offer a better price than the affiliate. So then you need to prevent the cancellation of the contract by not showing that price to a customer who already bought it somewhere else. So that might be the case for many services, from flight tickets, booking hotels, again, energy tariffs, telco operators, services which are highly personalized, and there are like a lot of rules behind when you can get the different price. There are much more. I just highlighted the major ones, and this is the way we went through before integrating the DMP. So for the proof of concept we did, we were planning some ideal scenario. It doesn't happen in the end, and we went to some other one, and I will show you some details behind how we integrated it. So first, there were three goals of that POC. First was to try to connect those systems. Because they are not connected, there is no connector available for Sitecore or for DMPs. We would like to test as well the personalization, so the classic one, if the use cases are working, but as well to decide where Sitecore can be the sole system executing personalization, and when we need the data from DMP because the case is more omnichannel and not just focused on Sitecore. And the third one was about testing the limits of such an integration. So is API ready? Is DMP able to connect through API? And it was about Salesforce DMP. Are in DMP available some data fields you can store Sitecore information to? This is so important. And is it really real-time? So can DMP provide real-time data about the segments on the fly within one visit, for example, a one-page visit? So three goals, and the major, like the core of the integration is about matching the cookies or the contact information inside DMP, because you would like to merge those data sets to be able to show to the Sitecore customers personalized content based on the segments which are in DMP. So effectively it means that there are two ways how to do it. First, Sitecore sends the Sitecore ID into DMP, and DMP store that ID with the Salesforce ID, so the data are merged through those two IDs. Or the second one is that Sitecore reads the Salesforce DMP and then is able to ask the DMP the DMP ID, and then is able to ask the DMP API for the segments. So you just need to load the segments from DMP to Sitecore by having those two contacts or cookies merged together. There are as well some rules of the system, or systems defined for the POC. So first, Sitecore, because this is quite known to you. So Sitecore manages and publishes content. That's normal. Sitecore executes personalization, testing, and A/B and automation scenarios as well. Sitecore do some kind of profiling, but it's questionable if it's needed because DMP can profile as well the visits on Sitecore. Sitecore do some tracking of user behavior to provide the structured clickstream data to business intelligence systems, and Sitecore provides the ID or Sitecore ID, which is effectively customer or experience profile ID from Sitecore. So if I talk about Sitecore ID, I mean this. DMP, on the other hand, manages segments and export the segments into other systems, and is tracking as well the user behavior by having a JavaScript on websites. And ideally, it stores all the data under one ID from different systems, from your website, from the apps you have, or from whatever. And there is as well web analytics, which is not Sitecore normally within enterprise clients. And it's tracking the user behavior, again, provide the clickstream data for business intelligence. But web analytics has a huge role in visualizing possible insights really flexibly because it's designed for that. And as well, store the measurable interactions, means goal, because DMP data are valid just for a few months, so they are not there forever. And Sitecore data doesn't make sense to store for years all the data because it will be quite costly. So it's better to have like the interactions and purchases, for example, done in web analytics because you can have the historical data. So in Sitecore would be quite costly to have them all in cloud and available. So roles. And the last one before the scheme, how to integrate it, is there are three prerequisites. So as I said, would be great to have some data import, either it's bulk upload to CMS, or it's the API you can ask for a given ID to provide the segments. And then the last one is to have the data fields in DMP where you can store the Sitecore customer profile ID into. So how we were planning to integrate it, ideal scenario. So first, there's some web rendering done in Sitecore, which renders the DMP JavaScript bacon, which is line of JavaScript, simply the tracking script for DMP. And we plan to enhance that script of an attribute which will hold the Sitecore customer profile ID. Then the script stores that information into DMP storage, and returns back segments. That's quite obvious. So then what we planned is to bulk load the segments to data exchange framework. So to take the data out of DMP, pair them with the records in Sitecore, and load the segments into XDB for a given contact. And then you can apply personalization on that, because segments are a special either custom facet in the XDB, or ideally would be as marketing lists in Sitecore. But because we did that in version 8, we haven't tried lists because it would be quite complicated with Sitecore 8. So this was ideal scenario. Now let's have a bit of demo time. So let's imagine that you are a new visitor to that site, and you go to a home page. What happened is that you are there first time, cookie is not stored in Salesforce, so I'll enlarge it a bit. So you see that this cookie is not identified in DMP because it's anonymous window, so nothing happened. If I reload the page, then I got this ID, which is coming from Salesforce. I have this ID, which is the experience profile ID from Sitecore, and I have no segments because there is no behavior defined segment in that which is available, simply because I've just loaded one page. So normally here I would load the segments and understand like what to show. How it looks when I load the segments. So I have another window with me being already recognized as a visitor. So you see that how it looks when you load the segments and how the segments look like. They are normal like text strings. So this is available to be stored in Sitecore. There are basically some kind of IDs from Salesforce DMP. So we will have contact ID from Sitecore, ID from Salesforce, and the segments which are coming from Salesforce for that Sitecore ID. So simply said, you have the data available which you can load into Sitecore, and you can personalize based on that. How it looks in Sitecore, because there is a custom rule to do this personalization. So I will try to connect. And you see that there is not admin B here, so you cannot log in into the Sitecore. I've changed that yesterday, so normally there is just a simple page where there is just one item, nothing special, and the rule looks like this. So if in the custom facet we have there is some string, so we can do personalization. So there is no like really good implementation behind that. Normally you would like to have lists here, or you would like to have name, not an ID, because you can imagine that if you have 50 segments, you will not remember the 50 strings, especially if you are a content editor who will work with that. So that's how it's implemented. And back to the presentation. So how the implementation looks like technically. What's the difference to the ideal scenario? So first, this logic is the same. There is just one thing. We are not rendering the JavaScript with the attribute from Sitecore because it doesn't make sense. Because we found out that DMP, Salesforce DMP, has no API. So it has no way how to connect to DMP and load the data into Sitecore. So we have created a custom logic, which is a JavaScript reading the data from Salesforce JavaScript, which is not the ideal one, especially if you consider data security and privacy and whatever. So it's just a test. So there is a logic that checks if the JavaScript data from DMP contains any list of segments. It do it as well 10 times repeatedly. I will tell you why. And simply we did that because we wanted to know about the limits and what's behind. And then the rest is quite good. So custom logic stores the data into XDB. They're available in customer profile, and you can apply the personalization logic. So the problem here is mostly this custom logic, which is really not scalable. There is a problem of data security as well. So it's some kind of, as I said, quick and dirty solution because we didn't want to spend like weeks on that. It was done within a week, so that's the reason why it's like that. So how it's done? JavaScript is existing and checking the DMP script for the ID and segments. There's a custom contact facet where the segments are stored in Sitecore in the experience profile. There is an API, so we are not using either data exchange framework or whatever, just a simple piece of code that stores the data into XDB, and we have one custom Sitecore rule to be able to do the personalization. But the ideal scenario is you would like to have segments as lists, because in Sitecore, lists are the segments in the end. So ideally, you would like to ask DMP for the names, IDs, and contacts to be stored in segments in Sitecore. Would be great if you have lists to have campaigns as well. The question for us is, are they coming from DMP? So it means a segment means campaign, or are there some other system that are driving the campaigns, typically campaign management, which is sitting somewhere else. So that's the question for us. And the huge problem is how all those data are stored. So we would like to have same name in Sitecore. So the segments should have the same names as in DMP. There would be maybe not a problem, but there is an ID that needs to be in that segment, because if you would like to synchronize that repeatedly, you need a segment ID stored in Sitecore so you can check it. So you need to modify somehow Sitecore lists for that to have additional fields available. And the last point here is really that this way is not scalable, it's not safe, it will not work with GDPR and all this stuff, because simply you are touching the data which are not yours in a way which is not, I would say, good. So the result of that was that simply the DMP has no API. Even Salesforce are not planning any API. I don't know if you saw the plan for the Salesforce Sitecore integration, like the general plan, because Salesforce, they are communicating it to customers, what they would like to integrate, and the DMP integration is like the last part of it. So somewhere end of this year, something like that. That's the only information which is coming from Salesforce. The same situation might be with other DMPs as well, because they are simply connected to other systems like Google AdWords, like Google Stack, like Facebook Stack, the others, but they are not thinking about creating an APIs for the end customers to be able to load data from DMP, because the data in DMP are quite valuable. So ideal scenario for Sitecore 9, if everything works well, XConnect is the way how to connect to DMP, because it might be real-time or near real-time in getting the data from the DMP. But the magic is here that the Sitecore ID should be stored in the DMP storage and should be available within the DMP. All clear, no questions still. Okay, so, okay.
Can we get a copy of the presentation later on?
Yes, I think so.
Yes,
yeah. So, findings from the POC, and then we'll go for the other round of questions. So there are the 5 major findings. So first, there is no DMP on the, no API on the DMP side, on Salesforce, and probably not within any other provider. So as I said, we are using JavaScript to load these data. In the DMP, there are some data fields you can use to store the information about the customer, but the amount of those fields is limited and it depends on your license. So if you have low license, there are no custom fields to be used within the DMP. If you have a higher license, you are able to have some fields, but the question is if the companies are not using that for something else, like for the name, surname, email, data which might be better than some kind of Sitecore ID. Then sometimes the Salesforce DMP is not giving back the ID from the DMP. So it takes days to get the DMP ID for a cookie, because sometimes the DMP is simply stuck and not providing that ID. That was the reason why we created a repeating checker of the ID if it exists. And there's one more problem connected to that not every time the segments are rendered in the real time. So even though you are following a pattern which is defined in DMP, sometimes the segment for that ID is coming from DMP the next day or the day after, because simply there might be a high load on DMP to calculate those segments, or there's again questions about licensing, because some of the segments defined in DMP might be not real time, might be calculated just during the night, because simply to have the power in DMP to calculate all the segments real time, it's quite expensive. So that's good to know. By the way, Salesforce DMP is providing a bulk file to upload into CMS. It's stored daily in Amazon bucket, so it's some kind of package you can take and load into Sitecore, but we haven't tried because there is no API in Sitecore 8, and this data exchange framework to configure would be too heavy for this POC. And the last one, if you would like to ask the API every time the visitor is there with every page for the segments, it might be quite heavy load, because scaling it up to hundreds, thousands of visitors and having like hundreds, thousands of API calls all the time might be difficult for the DMP, because if you imagine hundreds of customers doing the same, they need to invest a lot. And as well for XConnect is the question if in this scale it's like really a way to go through the XConnect the right one. So it's about the decision what the use cases should be run just in Sitecore with having the segments uploaded daily, and what are the use cases with the real time. For example, this affiliate sales scenario means that it should be real time, because it can be really the next page you see is the company, and in some industries is really a heavy proportion of sales which are done through affiliate sales, like flight tickets, like bookings, like whatever this kind. It's not like e-shops, but there are as well some aggregators. So those are the learnings, and that's all from me, and we have 10 minutes for the questions.
I noticed that you're using the ID that you're sending from Sitecore. Is that the contact ID?
It's not the contact ID, because we know that it might change during the time. So we thought about generating our own ID, which will not change. Okay. So it's simply any kind of identifier you can use within your experience database for the contacts.
Okay, so yeah, thanks.
Because this will be another mess, I would say. Yeah.
Other questions?
I have from Sitecore world, so I'm not familiar with Salesforce, but for now there is some Salesforce connector, but this is to connect to what?
This is the CRM connector.
CRM connector, okay.
So DMP is a different one, and for the CRM it works that you can load recognized contacts, so your contacts with email addresses or the identifier you can match to Sitecore, and as well the lists and campaigns. So the typical use case for CRM is to load those three entities, but this is another one. And normally, like segments here are quite similar to this to those which are in CRM, but they are much more here in DMP because they are more flexible.
Hi. So we know that in Sitecore we already have some capabilities in order to create already segments and do some personalization based on these segments.
Yep.
So do you have the possibility to have the real-time calculation of the segments into the other system? Because I think that in the end it will be kind of hard to have two different places to manage the segments. So is it possible to have everything calculated, the thing that we were supposed to calculate in Sitecore, to push it into DMP?
No, because Sitecore simply will not have, I will come back to this one. Because what's the problem of Sitecore? It doesn't have the connection to this technology stack. So the problem that Sitecore cannot track, for example, publishers and news portals with all these interactions which are essential to target the advertising. So that's the reason why companies are switching to DMP to define the segments. So there's no sense to calculate it in Sitecore. Sitecore is just the mirror of the DMP segments.
So my question was much more, is it possible from Sitecore to push everything that we have into DMP? Because obviously here the main force of DMP on Salesforce is to be able to aggregate the data from different channels. And here, if we want to have everything aggregated into one place, have all the data coming from Sitecore to this place.
Yeah, but the problem there is that I think there is no sense to load all those data into Sitecore. So Sitecore cannot have all those data. Sitecore has other data.
No. It's ready to push the data not into Sitecore, into DMC on Salesforce.
Yeah, I
from
understand.
Sitecore.
Yeah, I understand. But which data Sitecore will have? Because
The user journey.
Yeah, DMP is doing the same. It's just a line of JavaScript you plate into your website and it's tracking the same. So there are some other data which are reasonable, like information about the customers. So what's the address? What are the offline interactions, probably? What are the amounts of sales you sold to these customers? But the question is if those data are needed in DMP because they are rather flowing to CRM, and you create some knowledge to CRM from those data. So Sitecore is exactly not capable to work as DMP because it doesn't track all the data around, but the DMPs are working the same on tracking the journey as Sitecore. And they have more computing power to do that. It's cheaper and it's more prepared, I would say, because of all this, where companies are investing a hell of money, really, like big companies are investing more than into technologies, into digital advertising.
I think much like the same, I just struggle to understand this. So in Sitecore, the content editor is the one creating the content. They will mark content specialized for a segment. So they might, so let's say I'm a car salesman, and I will segment the visitor depending on if he sees a lot of sports car, I would say he's a rich guy or something like that. So Sitecore collects data that is adding to the segment value. Would you push that to the DMP so that you could also segment based on that in your DMP?
DMP is tracking the same data. So in the DMP,
but you don't configure the topic of a page in the DMP, do you?
But you can do that.
Okay.
You can do the same content tagging in DMP, deciding on what are the valuable pieces of content. Pages. Question is the content pieces. If you have a page where the content is for different segments, that's the question. But the tracking, which is common in Sitecore, to say there are some pages with some goals, with some valuable information like the engagement value on different goals and pages, DMP is capable to do that as well.
Okay.
Hello. How would you load the list of segments into Sitecore to enable the content editor to do personalization against that value?
So ideal way is, let's go back to the scheme, to this one. So ideal way is here. When is new segment coming, you create a new list in Sitecore and connect that information on the Sitecore side that the ID in XDB is connected to a list, or there is some flag in the custom facet that says if there is some value, marketing automation can add this contact to a segment, for example. We haven't tried because it looks pretty straightforward if you think just about the data entities. There is a list, there is a contact, and they are somehow matched through IDs. But the ways to do that will be either write it directly, so for the contact that it's part of the list, or you need to do that via custom facet and marketing automation, which makes sense. And this contact will be added to the list afterwards. But it should be driven by the lists which are in the DMP. So there is no other list for segments existing than it's in the DMP.
So I mean, from an editor perspective, if I am creating a new segment in the DMP and in Salesforce, I'm expecting to see this appearing straight away in Sitecore and be able to use it to run my personalization rule. Yeah.
So the lists are defined in DMP and they are transferred to Sitecore because not content editors are doing this in big companies. There are like business intelligence people and some guys from CRM department doing that, not the content editors. So it's for them, it doesn't matter in which system they define the segments. And we haven't tried, by the way, we haven't tried to create the lists in Sitecore based on the information from DMP.
So what you're saying is that once you integrate DMP in Sitecore, you can actually switch off the whole tracking in Sitecore and use the data from DMP to do conditional renderings. The conditions all works on DMP data.
Yeah.
That would make the site a lot faster.
No, probably, I don't know.
Sometimes.
But because when you compare, okay, there is a scenario for Sitecore definitely. But if you compare what the systems are doing, so all three systems are tracking. Analytics is tracking the same data as Sitecore. DMP is tracking the same data for Sitecore. Sitecore is here. It executes the personalization, so it needs some data. So it needs segments, but there might be other signals which are happening just here, and it doesn't make sense to create the segments in DMP. Like, for example, if there is an abandoned basket when you are buying something, this information is still in Sitecore, so you don't need any DMP for that, and you react to the data which are in Sitecore. So there are the cases where you don't need DMP, so it means the tracking should remain there. It will not have that much value because there will be still cases in Sitecore, but technically you can switch it off and you can use just the DMP for the tracking because of segments and the information provided.
Or in that case, limited tracking.
Yeah, or limited tracking, yeah. Okay. But you don't need to set up all the goals because you will set it up anyhow in the DMP, and the companies are doing that. Yeah, it would be duplicate work, exactly. But there is, like, the reason to have Sitecore as well for the cases is to have personalization, A/B testing, and the automation running.
Hi. In the same scenario as the gentleman behind, if you use the CRM with the DMP, like the Salesforce CRM with DMP, and you get the ID from there and get the data, then you still don't use Sitecore, could you actually do the same thing? And would be better to use the Salesforce CRM with the DMP instead of using the Sitecore data?
Well, I would say there are some real cases which are not covered by the CRM and DMP, and especially those are happening within Sitecore. So if there is something that needs to be tracked and the journey happens just in Sitecore, it doesn't make sense to send those data out of Sitecore and work with the segments out of Sitecore. So it's exactly about distinguishing what is the case just here and what are the cases together with DMP where it makes sense. Yeah, so abandoned basket, there is no reason to have DMP. because it can happen on Sitecore and the email can be sent from Sitecore, but there might be other use cases as well. There are definitely.
More questions?
It's about GDPR also.
Yeah.
You know that I think we are a lot working on that.
Yeah.
And so his DMP is GDPR compliant, or?
Yeah, all the big DMPs are already GDPR compliant because it's core business for them to collect the data.
Okay, and from a legal standpoint, if there is an issue related to GDPR, who will be responsible for that? Would it be DMP or would it be the owner of the website on Sitecore? If the issue is only about the segment and the personalization on DMP.
Well, I'm not a lawyer, so that's first, but I guess that it's all the time the owner of the application and the ecosystem responsible for that. And what I know that the DMPs are focusing on having everything as transparent and as complying with the GDPR regulation because they will lose otherwise the business.
We have room for one final question.
And if you have another one, I will be here today, tomorrow, so yeah, I'm open.
No, I just wanted to know if you had some kind of, let's say, business case for this, because obviously, you know, the cost of the DMP, I think you're right, you know, they consider it really valuable.
Yeah.
And of course, like the other gentleman there, I do have the GDPR concerns because actually, and I just wanted to say that, it's the collector of the data, so it is the owner of the website who is responsible and must acquire consent from the user before tracking, but that's a different question. But in terms of a business case, you know, do you have like rough costs, any idea of where it's at?
Yeah, I would say that investment into DMP is paid by a reduction of the media spend. So companies are buying all these ad technologies because they would like to reduce the costs of the display advertising by having the better targeting, so it's already paid. And there is a business case. This is the business case behind. You know, there are these companies like Procter & Gamble, they stopped investing into display advertising. They saved $100 million for a year and nothing happened because they stopped the untargeted advertising. So there are a lot of business cases behind.
Okay, thank you, Michael.
Thank you very much.